Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, I'm still recovering from injuries, but hopefully, along the path. We're recording this a little early because we are going hiking. So hopefully this podcast got posted while we were still hiking. It's the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. So we got away for some time in nature. Hopefully you did similar or are planning on getting some time in the fall colors and so forth.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. This is going to be our longest sort of through hikey type situation that we've done together, but also that DW has done.
Yeah, longest in terms of number of days. Yeah, so this is going to be, if all goes well, 4 days. So we'll see.
A lot of
3
kilometers.
nights. Yeah, not extreme. We've had people on talking about these big, long trips. Sometimes it's impressive to say you ran something really quickly, right? But there's a certain, you don't need to be prepared, if it all goes well, for nearly the amount of time, right? Carrying the food, building fires. There's a lot of stuff you just sort of skip through, which seems snazzy and fancy, right? But you're sort of just not taking, you're not learning all these other things and appreciating, what goes into surviving for multiple days away from the conveniences and trappings of life.
Yeah, no, it's actually funny. So the route that we're doing is the same first day that our friend Karen just ran for day one of her Bruce Trail excursion.
Oh, there
so
you
same
go.
total.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah.
Well, I asked her that. I was like, Karen, because Karen's coming with us. And I was like, Karen, which do you think is going to be harder, the hike or was the run harder? And she's like, oh no, the hike is always harder than than that because you have to carry stuff. And we've said that about La Cloche and Killarney Park. Hiking it is significantly harder than running it in a lot of ways, especially when you're trying to hike it fairly quickly. We'll call it efficiently, but it's tough to do when you're carrying all of your stuff.
So that's what we're up to. Yeah, we have some good questions today. Is there any other notes or mailings or so forth that you want to get out here while we're...
Ooh, I do actually have one exciting thing, and that is just that Shred Girls 3 is out November 20th. Yeah, super excited about that. That is going to be Jen's bumpy ride. If you've been following along with the Shred Girls series, Jen is the third and final story that we're telling in the Shred Girls books. You've already met Lindsay, you've met Allie, and now you get to meet Jen in a much more personal way. She's the super perfectionist who just wants to win every bike race. So naturally for this one, we're actually going bike packing and really getting away from racing.
Slowing it down. That's what we're talking about.
Slowing it down to speed it up.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a really good one. Honestly, I know I say this up for every Shred Girls book, but they're all like, this has been my favorite one to write, I think, just because I got to really write about bike packing, and that's pretty just fun. And I think it's a good one I'd say it's a good one to get a kid into bikes who maybe isn't yet, because it's a bit more campy and not campy, like hilarious.
Yeah, you didn't mean camping. Yeah.
It's
there's another way to enjoy bikes, right? I think that sometimes we get so into this racing, especially if you race and then you're trying to get kids in, racing is this thing we're trying to do, but there's a few clubs locally that are doing such a great job with just more of like enduro club or free ride club or whatever, right? Kids are just riding and playing on their bikes. And we say that, but it's hard to actually execute. So I think this is very good that you're sort of putting this out there, where Jen is the perfectionist, and maybe she actually finds, for her it might be therapeutic, but another kid it might actually be like, wow, a bike lets me go on these adventures to my friend's house to start, right? And
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, cool.
And also Jen gets to make some of the classic bike packing mistakes that I personally made the first time I was on a trip. So
okay, we're all learning.
When
is it coming? What can people do with this information?
Yeah, it's coming November 20th. And while we won't really do any in-person launch stuff, we will do some virtual fun stuff. So you can just head over to shred-girls.com and just make sure you sign up for the newsletter. I'll have all the dates and information and order information over there. And of course, when it is out, we'll post a link to pretty much everywhere. So yeah, just keep an eye out for that. It's going to be out in time for Christmas. We actually have 2 new hoodies in the Shred Girl store too that are inspired by the cover design for this one. So very bike packy, very fun. I'm very excited about them. So yeah,
cool.
Definitely.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations on that.
Thanks, dear.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into these questions.
Okay, yeah, we have 3 today, and we're going to try and roll through these fairly quickly. If you do have questions, you can shoot those over at the contact page at consummateathlete.com. You can also always drop them into the direct messages, drop into the DMs.
If you will.
and let us know what you're thinking, right? You can certainly, we'll take questions on anything. Don't worry if it's, certainly you can do a search. We might have talked about this in a podcast before or in an article. But everyone's got their own little twist on these questions too. So we're happy to sort of revisit things as well. So certainly just drop in that question when in doubt, and we'll try and get to it. We're trying to do more of these. We can always do a second episode. So without further ado.
Oh, actually, one more note, and then we'll get into the doing. You might have noticed that this is now up on video, so we'll have most episodes.
You're over promising because we don't know if it worked, but
I said most.
Okay.
Ideally,
there's a chance that this is up in video.
Assuming that everything goes according to plan. This is up on video, it's over on Instagram, over on YouTube. So if that's how you prefer to listen to your podcasts, we're going to do the Q&A ones, the ones that are just Peter and I. Will all be video for now or from now on, and then we'll be recording the intros to episodes. So if you want to just kind of get a quick taste of, who we have on, what's so exciting about them, why we're stoked to talk to them, we're going to be dropping those just into our Instagram every week.
Yeah,
or at least that's.
If I knew we were doing this, I might have not worn this random flat brim, but there you go. We're here.
Well,
okay.
Real life.
Yeah, I mean, we're all.
Okay.
Fashion choices.
Our first question here is coaching while racing. So we're not talking about coaching where you're sitting in front of the computer doing training peaks, kind of in a more traditional, like 9 to 5, you work an office job kind of thing. We're talking more either you have an actual like normal 9 to 5 job, and then you're coaching your kids, theoretically cycling team in this case, or theoretically like running or something like that. Either way, you're coaching. With probably your kids team, but it might be just if you're a teacher, you're coaching a school team. So it's taking a lot of energy, but you also have your own racing aspirations. So where's the balance? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I have several clients who are, all different. Again, we're all coming from different areas, different experiences, and then what racing is different, and so what training is different.
And you've even really had to kind of struggle with it.
Yeah, I mean,
learn from
that's I guess my life, right? But ultimately, this comes down to like we're adults. You got a lot of stuff on the go, but you have a goal for yourself. You want to do it, but there's other stuff that sort of, I'm going to say takes away, but it's not that other stuff isn't important, right? You just might be getting a promotion at work, or you're a CEO, or you're trying to make pass the bar exam. You're in med school. You got kids. Having kids. So this is sort of the ultimate question of like, how do you pursue your athletic goals, based on like time available, mental energy, and physical energy. We can get more specific with this. And again, I have a few clients that go, so Molly's saying, okay, you're going to go to Tuesday and Thursday practice, Tuesday and Saturday practice, the Wednesday night race, whatever it is, with this group of cyclists. So it's very specific. What I'm saying is I have a 9 to 5, whatever that is, it doesn't really matter. Maybe a family at home. And then you're going to also spend a few of your rides of the week with this group of athletes, kids, whatever. It could be adults, it doesn't really matter. This question was more about like a kids youth group, not even the fastest maybe of the kids. So you're not, the training isn't hugely, it's more focused on the coaching, which is good. Kudos for doing that. So it's not a huge training ride for you. But then you also want to race, right? So you run into this, like you've just given up, so quote unquote, not that it's not important, it's good, kudos, but you've given up 2 workouts of the week, maybe, right? What do you do, right? Because you want to do well on the Sunday race.
Well, I think to me, the first thing is actually you keep catching yourself saying giving up. So I think the first thing is actually probably more of a mental thing, where if you think that these coaching sessions aren't helping you get to your goal, they're probably not going to. So I think first, just kind of trying to flip the script a little bit in your head and sort of look for the moments in those sessions that actually are helping you.
Yeah.
Whether it's maybe you just jump into more of the practicing and like riding the stuff with the kids, or you're just kind of, practicing your track stands or whatever while you're, but just getting in the mentality of, no, this actually is a totally valid form of training, of practice.
And so ultimately, I think you're right. And often when people say, oh, I had to ride with a slow friend or my spouse or whatever, and it wasn't a workout, it was too slow, I usually look, and it actually was a fine, like probably as, it was maybe on the low end of what we, call endurance or effective training, but it was probably fine. So Molly's point is great. Maybe those 2 workouts are just low intensity workouts. I love to see if you can ride to and or from, or a bit, get there early and ride a little bit, maybe we call that setup or pre-riding, surveying the scene. So you like ride the lap you're going to ride with the group or the athlete you're riding with. So, this is effective because you're also preparing to be a good coach, and you've like surveyed the scene for, hazards or technical things. And then you ride with the group or the client, it goes really smoothly, it's a good ride. You focus on coaching. Like the dilemma here is like you can't do them both at the same time. Sometimes I'll have clients, oh, I know this is just like a crap ride. It's like, no, I'm here coaching, like this is my job. Like it's irrelevant that it's the same as, you know, what I want to do in my free time. So I think you have to focus on the coaching when you're there, because that's the commitment you've made. But there is, like, as Molly said, like you could be working on log hopping when it's, you know, part of the thing is that you could just be participating. You're just riding on trails, so you are going to hop logs. I think it's to short, you know, it is beneficial. And then the other piece is just programming the week. I think the main thing is finding a day or two during the week where you can actually do like the quality workout that you think you need to be doing. So we'll call that a hill interval workout. So it's a Tuesday and a Saturday training group ride. So probably, you know, it looks like maybe, you know, Sundays probably you're going to end up doing like some sort of long ride or a race. So Mondays are probably going to end up being off, as for most people. Tuesdays are this group ride. So maybe Wednesdays could be like a longer endurance ride or something. If you feel fresh, you could go harder on Wednesday, but probably, you know, either Thursday or Friday are probably the days, right? Probably Friday would be the day to try and get a hard workout in this case. And then Saturday would be more of an endurance day. Again, maybe you can add a second workout or an early workout or a late workout to make a Saturday a bit more of a longer endurance. Again, it could be 2 separate workouts if it has to be. And then, you know, whatever happens on Sunday, right? So that would be sort of the way, is just think through the week where how can you get the workout that's going to make you feel prepared. And I think, you know, as adults, if we can get one good one a week, we're probably away, especially when we're riding a bunch otherwise. So that would be, I guess, the main thing, right? The tips and tricks are really that, like ride before, ride after. Maybe on the Saturday ride, again, this particular person who was asking us this past weekend has kids, so they can't like really ride to and from, but maybe it's like bring the kids back home, dump them off, and then, you know, you just go for, you know, a 2-hour endurance ride, right? And that makes Saturdays like a lot of moving in the day.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other real secrets. I'm trying to think through the different people that I've talked to in the years.
Well, I think some of that, there's like a bit of, occasionally you might be able to find someone else who can drive your kid home, who also is a kid in the program.
Sure.
If you do live near someone, I know a lot of friends who do that, and then they'll like trade off who gets to ride or run home. So that's definitely, you know, that's a potential option. Yeah, so I think it's just being a little bit flexible, but also just relaxing about the fact that you're doing it. Because I think we just kind of get so stressed about these things. Like I had that when I was coaching cross country a couple of years back. I was very much like, oh no, my workouts aren't perfect, or like, oh no, now I'm doing extra workouts or something. And ultimately it really was not a big deal.
And some of this is, you know, you're almost there. It depends what coaching is. Again, it can mean a lot of different things, but sometimes, you know, the kids almost need, you know, a good role model, you know, someone to copy what they're doing, right? You know, that sounds odd, but like they want to see someone hopping a log and then they hop the log. It's not that you're instructing them or have this magical cue word or something you're going to give them. It's like they almost wanted just someone to play with. And if you're really good at playing, that's why sometimes having these like older athletes in with the group, right? It's like, we call them coaches, but it's actually, they're just similar others who are doing the thing. So sometimes it's like, you just need to go there and play, right? And be a good model. So maybe it's okay. I think the only other thought I had is like, if the goal you have is really ambitious, then that's where like we need to be more and more focused and put more and more time in, right? Like the one athlete I'm thinking about, like he just won national championships, but coaches 2 and 3 days a week. And he's lucky because the groups tend to be relatively quick. But you know, he's also been racing for a long time. So it's like the goal, he's like, national championship sounds good. He doesn't win it every year. This is maybe 3 or 4 he's got over his like, you know, 20 plus years, but it just isn't that ambitious, right? Which sounds weird, but it's like he's done it a lot. That's the level he's been at for a long time.
Right,
so
right.
There's a certain amount of work he has to do. He can get better. He gets better every year. But for him, like actually playing with the kids, and the kids are really good. Usually, they, you know, they do all the tricks, and he's come from way back in cycling, so he's not as good. He's getting older. So for him, working for bunny hops is probably great. Right? It's probably going to make him faster versus just going out and doing, you know, masters rides on the road bike is probably not, you know, the thing he needs to do a lot of.
Yeah. And that gets right back to my like mentality of like, this is going to be a positive for me, because yeah, often we don't really get out and do those play rides.
Right.
Like, I know I'm much more inclined to walk over something if it's just me in the woods, but if it's me like leading a group ride, or, riding with friends or with girls, like I will try to do
If
the
you
thing.
see the similar other do the thing, you get an idea that it's like, it could be possible.
Even if the similar other is a 6-year-old who just cleared a thing that I was very nervous about.
Yeah, if like a little 6-year-old does it, and sometimes that's all we need to see, right? It used to perplex me that people would be like, oh, I want to follow you off of this, right? Because I was like, I would never, like, I still don't like, but yeah, I think that's a lot of it, right? Is they want to know the speed and they want to know that someone else survived it, right?
Yep.
So that logic only goes so far, but that's the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
The last piece I had on this is just that there's seasons, there's cycles in the year, so we can periodize our year. So as the coach, you may have to take a backseat role. Maybe you're in charge. You said the training peaks or the organization, but you're not actually there on the Tuesdays and Fridays. Maybe you're in a different, maybe you work with the really fast group and you're actually like just there for supervision, adult supervision, but you're just getting towed along the whole time. Trying to draft to stay in the group or something if this was a road group. So seasonality, maybe you don't coach in the critical season, your specific phase, but then maybe you coach a lot during your off season, so just other disciplines that aren't your discipline. That might be, again, if the goal is ambitious, sometimes we need to, there's sacrifices. We ask this in the goal setting stuff, intakes and goal setting, yearly goal setting forms is, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to?
Right.
What are you going to have to sacrifice, right? Oh, if I want to, be fast at this, I can't be out late at night. I can't be partying all the time.
And I mean, now cycling is pretty much a year-round sport. Like I can name major races that are available for amateurs as well as pros that are running every month of the year.
With e-racing, track racing, fat bike racing,
cyclocross, gravel,
yeah.
mountain bike stage races, all this stuff.
We just did mountain bike nationals in October.
So I guess what I'm like, the schedules are more flexible. You might be kind of like in your local scene and you have like your local race series that's kind of in your head and that's what you've been stuck to. But maybe there's actually another goal out there that, maybe it is traveling for a race that happens in May. So that way you're basically done with your A race before your coaching season even starts. And then you can still do your local stuff, but you have a little bit less stress about it because that wasn't the race.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, cool.
Well, that's enough on that.
All right. Next question. We had 2 questions pretty similar. So the one was a woman who missed her long rides leading into a longer event. She missed them and the event's in 9 days. So she has time to do one more long ride ahead of the event, but does it make sense to actually do a longer ride to kind of make up for missing those 2? And then the other question we actually had was from a runner who sort of similar circumstance. Her longest run for prepping for a marathon did not go well. And she was about to be starting a 6-week slow taper down to race day. She's now, 4 weeks out from the race, but 2 weeks after her biggest run was supposed to be, and wondering should she still do that big run? But in her case, she has 4 weeks, not 9 days. So let's start with maybe the 9-day one and the bike first, because I think they're similar questions, but possibly pretty different answers.
Yeah, and the difference between missing it and doing it, but it just not going, maybe as amazingly as we hoped, right? So
I guess, so first of all, what is the efficacy of doing this long run or a ride this close to the event?
Well, in the case of the 9 days out, you missed it. So you maybe had a tough weekend, you didn't get to train. And then, we're in that week before the race week. And so, I always look at that as the endurance gains are something that tend to be, we think about them as long lasting, but they take a long time to build, right? When we look at our top endurance athletes, they're usually they've been training for 10 plus years. Again, the gains last. You can take some time off and you're still, have the adaptations, but they take a long time. So 9 days out, you're not going to necessarily get endurance or fitness gains per se that you're going to see on race day. What you do risk, though, especially if this is a long ride or certainly a long run, is fatigue, right? Because we're getting to that time period where we actually want to start being fresher, right? If we look at our fitness score and our TSS or our load, we want the week's load not to be so much greater than what we're used to, right? We could call this a taper or a peak, or just we're not overdoing it, right? We're sort of at our normal day-to-day load or even a little lower, so that we're starting to get positive and feel fresh and ready to ride, right? To feel recovered, to feel ready to run.
Right. So say for example, and this is not the exact situation, but say you had an 8-hour ride that was supposed to be that long ride.
Yeah,
let's say like
I would not do that. I think
okay.
we're almost looking at like, maybe you could get and this is maybe what I said, something like you could maybe do a 2 or 3 hour ride on the bicycle you're looking for.
Well, you didn't let me finish
Sorry.
I was gonna say, so the 2 weekends I got missed, say it was a 6 hour and an 8 hour that got missed. So yeah, what do you do with that? You obviously aren't gonna go out and do an 8 hour ride 9 days ahead, like a week ahead of your race at that point.
I don't know if that's obvious, but you probably wouldn't want to. Yeah, I mean, I think this is where we could look at, again, something like a 90-minute to 3 hour probably at the most. And thinking a bit about the quality, again, there's probably workouts that you're forgetting that are like we could call them the peak workouts, the taper workouts, the speed workouts, the sprint workouts, whatever you believe in, whatever you would do in the week. We don't want to drop those just at the sake of the endurance. Like we're making, in this way, it's like the endurance athlete bias to think that hours are more important than the quality. And again, in those last month, we're really thinking like, does my bike work? Does my gear work? What are the things that are going to make me DNF or have chafing or have to stop? Am I dialed on fueling? How am I going to be really low stress those 2 weeks before? So to me, you're into the window, right? You're showing up with what you have.
Right.
And I always think back to that Rebecca Rush quote of like, you're never as prepared as you want to be on the start line, like no matter what. But
Sure.
sometimes you just have to show up and go.
Yeah. I think to me, I really think about the mental side of this, which is for a lot of people, that would be super stressful, missing your 2 last big rides, or having in the marathon case, having your last like long run not go as well as you wanted it to, or didn't actually even get to finish your last long run. That could put you in a pretty weird state, sort of thinking about your upcoming race, right? So I would actually, kind of to your point, I would really be going back and looking through my training log maybe, and even just kind of noting like, oh, no, I did all of these workouts. I did all these long runs. I did all these long rides. You have done the hard things. It's not like you haven't done anything ever. So I think it's worth just taking even 10 minutes just to scroll back through and just be like, oh, okay, this was kind of an outlier. Normally I've been pretty consistent. Normally I've put in the volume. Normally, like, I've hit all my workouts. I think that's a good place to start. I would say with the running situation where you have a few more weeks, I actually think 4 weeks out is fine to do a longer run, especially if in this particular case, getting to that 20-mile mark was like a big mental thing.
Right. And you do have to balance that, the physiology versus the psychology, right?
Especially with marathons where you know that there's going to be that, like, the marathon wall that you hit right around mile 20 for most people, because going over 20 miles is just, it's huge. Most people are never going to run 20 miles in their lives.
Yeah, and there's some people do hit it, but like there is the idea that some of it is also just the pacing, right? And being conservative early and knowing your pace well. And again, you've probably done lots of training. The plan, I think, that of the person you were talking to seemed very linear in that it just kept stepping it up and stepping it up. So I imagine there was a lot of practicing of like the pace you're going to hold. So you just go in a little conservative, right? And you go at it. And as a first-time marathon, or a first-time event distance, where we're really thinking is, I have a client going for their first gravel race. They have lots of experience in longer distance road, but it's very much this is our complete before we compete, right? I really like this. It's difficult to say, but that's the idea, right? We got to get some reps in. So we're going to have a really long run in 4 weeks. In this case of this person you're talking to is, it's going to come again in 4 weeks. You want to be recovered. What happened in this one is, you weren't recovered. And I think you're right. Probably something long, whatever we can agree on is like the balance between being smart training and, feeling like you're ready is probably good. As far as that, again, risk reward, right? If we end up with knee pain for the last 3 weeks, then what was the point of doing 21 miles?
Yeah.
And again,
we're talking like all systems are go, like no signs.
Yeah. And again, like, why would we ignore the last 3 weeks of the plan that, again, probably have things like speed and recovery and, again, getting ready for the marathon? What could go wrong in a marathon with like bathroom breaks and things chafing? And, you talk to them a bit about the aid station, what the fuel is they're going to hand you in a cup, right? Sometimes people, it's just this classic stuff, but we forget that just thinking about hours, right? And it's just not about that, right? And this is, we confuse performance sometimes with like, you could say physiology or training stimulus, right? Like performing a marathon isn't the same as, getting a stimulus to increase your endurance, right? I always talk about 90 minutes. I just picked that arbitrarily, but it's the idea that like, if you go to 90 minutes, how much benefit is that? So if I keep riding for 3 hours and then 5 hours and then 8 hours and 12 hours, is it just benefit forever? Or would we agree that at some point you're not getting more benefit? That curve slopes down, right?
Right.
And I talk about that a lot, but again, people often forget this, right? That it's how much more benefit are you getting by riding or running more and more and more and more? You might be knackered at the end of it, but is that the goal, to be knackered, or is it to get an adaptation to your endurance and your physiology?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's a difficult thing to understand because the adaptation comes before we're knackered and we completely fall over in most cases.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I do want to say about this though is, if you notice that 3 weeks out of like 3 out of every 4 long runs or rides or workouts or whatever are getting missed because of work or family or what have you, to me that's a good sign that your training plan clearly isn't working for you with your life right now. It might be the best training plan for like the sport, but it's not necessarily like, it's clearly not working for you because you either have like, either stuff has happened in your life that has come in and caused the need to shift the plan, or you just really didn't have time for it to begin with, which is completely understandable because this is all extra stuff on top of everything else that we have in our lives. So I think seeing that as like two missed weekends because of kind of freak stuff, okay, but when it's consistently becoming more of an issue, then that's a sign.
So maybe that like Wednesdays, it seems like might be a good long run or ride for the one person I was talking to. It also may be to that, like some days we just have to be like 90 minutes is all I have, right? There's lots of days I want to ride or run more, but I got to be back. And I aim to get 90 minutes in.
Well, you always laugh about this whenever you're talking to new clients. Often you say like, how many hours do you have in a week to train? And they're like, oh, I've got like 15 to 20. And you're like, okay, so Monday, oh, I don't have time Monday.
Yeah.
Tuesday, I have like 30 minutes on Tuesday. And you go through and you're like, so you actually have 4.5 hours to train, realistically. So I think it's really important to just kind of think about it a little bit more globally too. And actually the switching the long thing to a weekday, I found that worked really well for me when racing was much more of a thing in our lives, either when I was, managing a cyclocross team, or even just when you were racing a lot and we were traveling a fair bit on weekends, or we'd be doing clinics on weekends all the time. The long run on the weekend just doesn't work when you're coaching a clinic all day.
Maybe even relates to that previous question, right? Of rethinking what the week is. And we said that, but we didn't say it explicitly that like, you may have to shift things so that like the weekends midweek, if you have that flexibility, right? And that might be, getting your spouse to take over on Wednesday nights and you get her to work at 5 and then you ride till 8, right? And that sounds, it's 3 hours, that's a long day, kudos to you for doing that. But if that's the goal, that might be the thing. And then maybe that gives you like a Sunday where you're sort of like relaxing a bit more.
Yeah. And even getting into that, like thinking about, ask your boss if you can do 8 to 4 on Wednesdays or something like that, if you are working more of that traditional 9 to 5 kind of thing. But yeah, thinking about being a little more flexible, because and actually we're going to have an episode coming up on this because I'm so passionate about talking about like shift work and just all of the different schedules that people have now. I just think it's ridiculous that we still base everything around the idea that everyone has a really Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. It's just not realistic for any of us anymore, really.
Right. Yeah. And that shift work's a tricky one, right? Of balancing. I have a few nurses and firefighters, right? And it's how do you balance sleep and recovery with quality? And, again, all these hours we think we should be doing, but again, you're working 24-hour shifts or something. And
we have a lot of students who listen to this. We have a lot of people who are working multiple jobs. So they're not working just like one sort of set of hours. So I think that's a really valuable thing. So stay tuned for that coming up, because I think that's a super interesting one. But let's get on to
last question. So track without track is this one, right? So it's track cycling. How do we get ready for this? Those tracks are still slow to get going from what I understand. Reduced times, fewer people can be inside. And it's also just a discipline. It reminds me of swimming in some ways. It reminds me of what's another similar, cross-country skiing would be similar. You just can't do the thing, as much as you maybe would ideally, right? If you could just pick how often you could ride on a track, or, a velodrome, you probably would have someone doing the thing they want to do more frequently, more specifically.
Yeah, and we talked about this obviously before we hit record here. And I mean, I raced on the track for a year or so when I was still back in New Jersey, and I was sort of between the two tracks. I was about an hour and a half from the Casena Velodrome, and then about an hour 15 from Trexlertown. So two of the bigger velodromes in the U.S. And I never really rode on the track except to race because it was, hour and a half to get there, hour and a half to get back. That's 3 hours. So unless I was gonna suddenly like go all in on becoming a professional track racer, it made no sense for me to go to the track to train.
Right.
But I still really like the
Which
idea.
is a nice way to get time back if you just ride at home instead of driving to some of these things. Yeah, so that's that. Like, would you ride 3 hours from home on a Wednesday, or would you go to the track and train for 3 by 6 minutes or whatever you actually get to ride? It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one. So I think from what I can tell, I did a quick look at this person who was sort of asking this, and I think they're doing a good job, right? You ride your road bike and you're probably doing strength. I would think those are probably the two big rocks, honestly, for most cyclists. But riding a road bike, riding on the and then strength training in a way that you should be doing for track. I'm not an expert at track cycling, but I think there's a lot of people who race track, especially over the last year and a half, many who went to the Olympics and medaled, who didn't get a lot of time, even on the track, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe on the track with teammates, or on, there was a lot of limited, and they still were able to perform. And so I think that's a testament to, like, it's basically bike riding. There's obviously some fixed gear and some sloped walls and some tactics and some rules.
And we thought through some kind of practical applications, like practicing things like standing starts and starting in a harder gear that would be more traditional to like a track gearing kind of thing.
And I suspect, though, that people who are into track probably know these things better than us. Like, it's, probably like a hill interval where you're over geared or something. I would imagine you'd be doing something like that. I know the track, we have a Pan Am track down in Milton, Ontario, near Toronto. And I know they were getting around, they wanted to work on starts, and they were maybe just trying in the parking lot and things like this. So there's like a standing start, right? You could probably just go do a cyclocross race or something. But if you wanted, get your fixed gear bike out, and you could probably figure out a way to do this in a safe, open space, parking lot, whatever. If you really needed to work on the technique on that. But I don't know. I don't know how much people ever really do it, right? So I think that as a track rider, you're probably very used to not having access to the track. Hopefully it gets better. For whatever reason, you're not getting access to it, but I think you're probably doing well if you're again, I think I saw some deadlifts, some classic weightlifting. I don't think it has to look like cycling. I think you want it to be just classic weightlifting. And then again, whatever bike stuff you should be doing, whatever you'd normally be doing. And then I don't know, you figure out the track, hopefully it gets better.
I'm going to say if you're newer to the track, like if you've only done it a couple times and you really loved it though, and like you want to get back to it, but you just haven't really been exposed to it that much. If you can get your hands on a fixed gear bike, I do think there is a huge value in learning to operate one of those.
Probably.
Because
yeah.
I realize you're talking to someone who is much more experienced
on
the track.
We don't know.
Yeah, you think. So See, you're a good cyclist. So you keep just kind of being like, oh yeah, fixed gear, totally casual.
Well, that's what I mean. It
problem.
Depends where the person's starting from, right? Because this person may be starting, as we were saying, they may have to like really dial in on this and go hard on it. So you're right. If that's one of the things, and we're like, okay, we're going to go to the track and we're going to get really shocked. What can we tick off? I think you're spot on. Find a fixed gear. Go ride it to commute every day to work. I don't know how much of a barrier. No one ever really talks about that. So maybe it is a barrier.
Well, I think it would have been for me if I hadn't been super hip in college and had a fixed gear to get around campus. So I actually knew how to ride a fixed gear because of just getting around campus like a cool kid.
Sure.
Yeah. But if I hadn't had that, it would have been a pretty unpleasant surprise the first time I hit a track. Sure. I will say that. So I think that there's value there.
So we can go deeper. If someone has a suggestion for a track coach, it's sort of, again, I haven't spent much time with that. It's only sort of stories I've been told from other coaches. But yeah, if people are keen on track stuff, we can certainly have someone on to talk about that.
Yeah. And I think the more global answer to the question is sort of what you alluded to, where you're sort of breaking down what are the elements to the sport. And
the demands, like, yeah, again, because you got sort of towards the, like, it's a fixed gear bicycle, but you could also just look at like physiology wise, like what the track riders have always sort of strength trained. So it's more accepted for that. I mean, we're all coming around, but so that's like piece, right? You're gonna have this huge high force to get going or to sprint or whatever.
No, this is,
and then you're pedaling a bike.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, this is a really specific question, but this is one that you actually get in your coaching all the time, where you have people who live in, live in cities, live in Toronto, live in New York City, all over the place, that want to race a race like Leadville,
but never ride a mountain bike or climb a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make it happen.
So this is not an abnormal question, right? A lot of people do not live near the exact thing. I mean, we have a great rail trail right behind us, but we're a few miles from trails, and that is not much. And theoretically you could drive to them every day, but as we kind of talked about, even if you think about it, it takes me 20 minutes to drive to the trail. That's 40 minutes of my day, which is not nothing.
Right.
Like it's laughable to some people who have very long commutes, but on the global scale of you only have so many hours, 40 minutes in a car is a lot when you're trying to do like an hour run.
Yeah, so you pick your battles, right?
So
maybe do some extra step ups, and you work on your running, and you try and find some hills to run up and down, and then sometimes you run to the trails, or drive to the trails.
So I think it is about commitment, though. It's about, okay, if you want to race a Leadville, or you want to race on trails, like, okay, you're gonna have to get to the trails at some point.
I think, you can do it. It's just like, how ambitious is the goal, right? If this is just like a challenge to try and finish it, again, like, you can do what you want. I think it's Chris Rock said, you can drive a car with your feet if you want to, but that doesn't make it a good idea.
Well, and also just like, why are you doing that goal if you don't want to do the training, or you can't?
Yeah, and so that's a little different. I think this person's really psyched on track, and I think that they're able to get to the track in normal times, but maybe they're it's exactly what you're saying. Maybe it's a 3-hour drive. It's too late at night. It's not working with schedule, whatever. So then it does get to that ultimate question: is maybe not this year, and maybe we do something else. Maybe this is the cyclocross year, and we work on some of the other elements of cycling that are certainly going to cross over. Right, skills are going to cross over. The low, force out of the bottom of that sort of off camber climb when we have to sprint back up it. I think the athleticism getting on and off the bike is just great overall.
Flip flop that hub, throw some
race it single speed. I don't think that's a bad idea either. So there is that of like, someday, but not this year. Maybe if it's a COVID related, there just isn't track times. It's at weird times. Just sometimes it's like, focus on something else that you can do, and that isn't going to provide the stress. And I think, I just got off the phone with a client who lives in the mountains, used to do crit racing and cyclocross on the Northeast. There isn't really cyclocross where they are, but there's amazing mountains, so they can hike and they can do like backcountry skiing. And it's like, yeah, you should use this environment, right? That's why this whole Comes with an Athlete thing is embracing where we are, right? Sometimes you can swim, sometimes you can't. So I think the only last thing I had is definitely go back and look at some of the cross-country skiing podcasts we've done. We haven't done much around swimming. We did some stuff early in COVID. So if you can bear that, re-entering the beginning of the pandemic, there's a lot of podcasts and things going around about how are we going to swim, right? What are the swimmers doing without being able to swim, right? And that's probably been one of the most affected sports. I would say cross-country skiing was actually probably one of the better overall. They just always have to deal with no winter. Separate from the pandemic, but
getting worse and worse every year.
When you think about, again, a lot of these topics around like being a healthy person, what can you work on where you are, general fitness is important, strength training is important. What do you need to learn? What can you work on in your sport, right? Do you understand the rules of track? So there you go. Hopefully some ideas, track without track.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap up there. Again, if you have any more questions, hit us up over at consummateathlete.com or at consummateathlete on Instagram. We're over on Twitter, we're over on Facebook, and this will be on YouTube as well if you prefer watching us be weird in that format. And yeah, let us know what you think. Hit the rate, review, subscribe, etc. buttons in wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.